What if everything you believed about your family was built on a lie? For Luke Garrison, a 64-year-old decorated veteran, this nightmare became reality when a simple DNA test shattered his entire world. The results sat before him, cold and clinical on white paper, yet devastating in their truth. None of the 4 children he had raised, loved, and sacrificed for shared his blood. Not a single one. Have you ever wondered if the people closest to you are hiding devastating secrets? Would you rather live in blissful ignorance or face a painful truth? For most of us, these questions remain hypothetical, but for Luke, they became the haunting reality that transformed his identity overnight. Luke Garrison stood as a pillar in his community, a man whose military medals hung proudly in his study, whose bass voice led Sunday hymns at church, whose firm handshake sealed his reputation as someone who valued honor above all else. His 4 children, Malik, Deshaun, Patrice, and Tiana, had grown under his watchful guidance, each carrying what he believed was his legacy. But beneath this portrait of family harmony, his wife Odessa had maintained a web of deception for decades. A deception so profound, so meticulously maintained, that it remained hidden until a granddaughter's medical emergency forced the family into genetic testing. In one moment, standing in his modest study surrounded by photographs chronicling a family life he thought was real, Luke's identity as a father evaporated. The man who had faced enemy fire with unwavering courage now faced an enemy he never saw coming: betrayal from the woman who had shared his bed for over 40 years. What transforms a respected veteran, a church elder, a neighborhood mentor into someone capable of calculated, deadly revenge? How does a man whose moral compass had always pointed true suddenly find himself planning the unthinkable? This isn't just a story about infidelity, it's about the fundamental human need for truth and belonging. It's about what happens when the foundation of a person's entire existence is revealed to be nothing but sand, washing away under the merciless tide of reality. If you're fascinated by stories of betrayal and the psychological breaking points of honorable people, hit subscribe now and join our Crime Insider community. Because as Luke Garrison's story will show, sometimes the most dangerous moment in a person's life comes not when facing an external threat, but when facing the collapse of everything they believe to be true. In the working-class neighborhood of Eastwood, Luke Garrison grew up surrounded by the steady rhythm of community. Born in 1959 to a postal worker father and a mother who taught elementary school, Luke absorbed the values that defined his close-knit community: resilience, faith, and unwavering family loyalty. Sundays meant pressed suits and polished shoes at Monroe Street Baptist Church. Weekdays meant discipline and hard work. By 18, while his friends pursued college or local jobs, Luke enlisted in the military, seeking both purpose and a way to serve the country that had given his parents opportunities denied to their own parents. His 26-year military career took him across continents, from desert combat zones to diplomatic missions in Asia. Each deployment added medals to his uniform and wisdom to his character. He rose through ranks not through political maneuvering but through consistent excellence. Fellow soldiers called him Steady Garrison, the man who kept his cool when missions went sideways, who never left anyone behind. Luke's personal code was simple but absolute: honor your word, protect your family, serve God, defend your country. These weren't abstract concepts but lived experiences. He sent money home to help neighbors with medical bills. He mentored young recruits who reminded him of himself. His handshake meant more than any written contract. When a military assignment brought him back to his hometown in 1983, Luke met Odessa Wilson at a community fundraiser. Unlike the outgoing women who typically caught his eye, Odessa carried herself with quiet confidence. Her eyes held secrets, suggesting depths beyond her soft-spoken manner. When she laughed, a rare but transformative event, Luke found himself transported. She doesn't give her story away easily, his mother warned. But for Luke, Odessa's mystery was magnetic. Here was a woman unlike anyone in his ordered military world, someone whose silence felt not like emptiness but like a promise of something profound waiting to be discovered. 6 months later, they married beneath the stained glass windows of Monroe Street Baptist, beginning what Luke believed would be his greatest mission of all: building a family. The Garrison home on Maple Avenue stood as a testament to Luke's military precision and Odessa's quiet elegance. Inside those walls grew 4 children who became the center of Luke's world. Malik, the eldest, inherited Luke's analytical mind but none of his extroversion. At family gatherings, he'd observe from corners, processing everything. His college engineering degree and methodical approach to problems made Luke beam with pride. "That boy thinks like a soldier," Luke often said, never noticing how Odessa would fall silent at such comparisons. Deshaun brought music and motion into the household. His athletic build and natural charisma made him a neighborhood star. Where Luke saw his own leadership qualities, others occasionally remarked on Deshaun's resemblance to a local music teacher. Such comments were quickly dismissed by Odessa as people talking nonsense. Patrice, their only daughter until Tiana came along, possessed a fierceness that both challenged and delighted Luke. Her sharp intellect and outspoken nature made family discussions lively affairs. Luke attributed her passion to his side of the family, though her complexion ran noticeably lighter than her siblings, a fact explained away as genes skipping generations. Tiana, the baby of the family, wrapped everyone around her finger with her artistic talent and gentle spirit. Luke called her his unexpected blessing, born when Odessa was 40. Her arrival coincided with Luke's longest deployment. He first held her when she was nearly 3 months old. Sunday dinners after church became sacred ritual. Extended family and neighbors gathered around Odessa's renowned sweet potato pie and Luke's barbecue, all while gospel music played softly. The Garrison family exemplified community values: charitable work, academic achievement, religious devotion. Yet small moments punctured this perfect image. Unexplained phone calls that Odessa took in hushed tones. Her insistence that Luke not attend certain parent-teacher conferences due to scheduling conflicts. The family photo albums with curious gaps in chronology. When Luke's mother commented that none of the children had his distinctive earlobes, Odessa redirected the conversation so smoothly that even Luke didn't notice. When medical forms asked for family history, Odessa insisted on completing them herself, citing Luke's busy schedule. These moments, seemingly insignificant in isolation, formed a pattern that Luke's devotion to family prevented him from seeing, a pattern of carefully maintained secrets that would eventually bring everything crashing down. The call came at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. Luke fumbled for the phone to hear Malik's voice, tight with panic. "Dad, it's Amani. We're at Memorial Hospital. The doctors say it's her kidneys." 5-year-old Amani, Malik's only daughter and Luke's first grandchild, had collapsed during a dance recital. Within hours, specialists delivered the grim diagnosis: acute renal failure caused by a rare genetic condition. Her survival depended on finding a compatible donor, with family members offering the best chance for a match. "We'll need everyone tested," the specialist explained in the sterile conference room. "The condition has hereditary components, so mapping your family's genetic profile will help us understand inheritance patterns and identify potential donors." Luke organized the testing schedule with military efficiency. Malik and his wife went first, followed by Luke's other children, then Luke and Odessa. Blood samples were drawn, cheeks swabbed, forms signed. The family prayer circle in Amani's hospital room grew as they awaited results. 3 days later, Dr. Winters requested a private meeting with Luke. "Mr. Garrison, we've encountered some inconsistencies in the genetic profiles that require clarification." The doctor's clinical language couldn't mask his discomfort as he explained that preliminary results suggested unusual genetic patterns. When Luke pressed for details, Dr. Winters hesitated. "Mr. Garrison, the markers indicate that, well, there appears to be no genetic relationship between you and your son Malik." Luke stared at the doctor, certain he'd misheard. "That's impossible. Malik is my firstborn. I suggest we verify with additional testing before drawing conclusions," the doctor added carefully. That night, Luke sat alone in his car in the hospital parking lot, mind racing. A mistake, it had to be. Yet something cold settled in his stomach, connecting dots he'd spent decades ignoring. When expanded testing returned the following week, Luke requested the results be sent directly to him. The manila envelope sat unopened on his desk for 3 hours before he found the courage to break the seal. Page after page of scientific terminology confirmed what now seemed inevitable. Genetic markers indicated no biological relationship between Luke and any of his 4 children. More disturbing still, comparative analysis suggested different paternal lineages for each child. The weight of 40 years of deception crashed upon him. Family photos on his desk, Christmas mornings, graduations, fishing trips, suddenly transformed into evidence of an elaborate lie. His hands trembled as he reached for his reading glasses, examining each page again, searching for an error that wasn't there. The shocking truth Luke discovered next will leave you speechless. Hit like if you've ever had your trust broken, and comment below if you think some secrets should stay buried. For 3 days after reading those results, Luke didn't leave his study. The foundation of his identity, respected veteran, faithful husband, devoted father, had disintegrated beneath him. This betrayal didn't just alter his understanding of his family, it erased the very purpose that had guided his life for 40 years. Dr. Eleanor Phillips, a specialist in trauma psychology, explains, what Luke experienced is clinically known as betrayal trauma, a profound psychological injury that occurs when trusted figures violate our core expectations. For veterans already managing combat PTSD, this creates a devastating compound effect. Their brain's threat response system, already sensitized by war experiences, goes into constant alert. Luke's military training had prepared him for external threats, enemy combatants, dangerous terrain, strategic challenges. Nothing had equipped him for an attack from within his most sacred space, his marriage. The nightmares from his combat tours returned with new intensity. In his dreams, faceless enemies now wore familiar features, Odessa's smile, his children's eyes. He woke gasping, heart pounding, the distinction between past war zones and present reality blurring dangerously. I don't know who I am anymore, he confessed to his VA therapist during an emergency session. Every memory feels contaminated. Every family photo is a lie. I built my life on honor and truth, but lived 4 decades in a complete fiction. His therapist noted alarming changes: hypervigilance, emotional numbness alternating with explosive anger, withdrawal from supportive relationships. Luke's military coping mechanisms, compartmentalization, emotional control, mission-focused thinking, began to fracture. Most disturbing was Luke's emerging sense that this betrayal demanded a response equal to its magnitude. His journal entries revealed a man grappling with concepts of justice, revenge, and restoration of honor, concepts that had served him well in war but turned dangerous in civilian life. Church became unbearable. Sitting in the pew where his family had gathered every Sunday, Luke now felt exposed, certain that others must know or suspect the truth. He declined dinner invitations, avoided community gatherings, and stopped attending his veteran support group. Shame is the most isolating emotion, Dr. Phillips notes. Even though Luke was the wronged party, many betrayal survivors experience profound shame, questioning their judgment, their worth, their very perception of reality. This isolation removes crucial support systems precisely when they're most needed. Behind his locked study door, Luke's thoughts grew darker. The honorable soldier who had once exercised restraint even in combat now contemplated actions that crossed moral boundaries he'd spent a lifetime defending. Luke placed the DNA results on the kitchen table between them. Odessa's eyes darted from the papers to his face, her fingers twisting her wedding band. 40 years, Odessa. 40 years living a lie. Her shoulders curled inward. Luke, I can explain. Explain what? That none of our children are mine? That you've been laughing behind my back while I worked double shifts to put them through college? While I bragged about passing down my father's traits. Odessa's composure cracked. I never laughed at you. Never. Then tell me the truth. All of it. Who fathered Malik? The kitchen clock ticked between them. Finally, Odessa whispered, Robert Jenkins. Before we were serious. He left for Chicago before I knew I was pregnant. Deshaun. Michael Townsend. The music teacher. Her voice quivered. It was during your second deployment. I was so alone. Letters came months apart. I thought you might not come back. Luke's fist crashed against the table. Patrice. William Cargill. Your friend from the reserve unit. Tears streamed down her face. That one time when we separated for 3 months. I didn't plan it. It just happened. And Tiana? My baby girl? Pastor Davis. The admission barely audible. During the marriage counseling sessions. The room seemed to shrink around them. Luke stood motionless, each revelation striking like physical blows. Why marry me at all? Why continue this charade? Odessa looked up, eyes red-rimmed. Because I loved you. Because you were a good man, better than any of them. Because when I discovered I was pregnant with Malik, you had just proposed, talking about building a family. You wanted children so badly. So you let me raise another man's child? I planned to tell you eventually. But you loved him instantly. Then came Deshaun, and it seemed impossible to confess without destroying everything. Each year passed, and the lie grew too big to undo. Luke stared at the woman he thought he knew. You robbed me of the choice. You decided what truth I deserved. That night, the Garrison home fractured along invisible fault lines. Luke moved to the spare bedroom. Dinner went unprepared. The family photos that lined the hallway disappeared into a box. When the children called, Luke let them go to voicemail. Not yet ready to decide if they remained his children despite blood saying otherwise. Odessa slept on the couch, her pillow damp with tears, while Luke stared at the ceiling, a chasm opening between who he had been yesterday and who he had become today. 3 weeks after the confrontation, Luke entered a phase that military psychologists might recognize as mission preparation. The disciplined veteran who once planned peacekeeping operations now directed that same methodical focus toward a darker purpose. His military-honed ability to compartmentalize emotions served a new function. By day, he maintained a hollow routine: morning coffee, newspaper, yard work. By night, he transformed his home office into an intelligence center, meticulously tracking the men who had fathered his children. Veterans with PTSD often return to tactical thinking when facing emotional threats, explains Dr. Marcus Reed, forensic psychologist. Their training teaches them to identify targets, gather intelligence, and neutralize threats. When combined with betrayal trauma, this can create a dangerous psychological cocktail where revenge feels like restoring order. Luke's investigation began with names. Robert Jenkins had returned from Chicago years ago, now running a barbershop downtown. Michael Townsend still taught music at the community center. William Cargill had moved to a neighboring county. Pastor Davis led his congregation every Sunday, just 3 miles from the Garrison home. Luke observed their routines from parked cars, noting work schedules and daily patterns. He accessed public records, built files, created maps, applying reconnaissance skills honed during military service. His journal entries revealed a man who viewed these 4 men not as individuals but as enemies who had violated something sacred. They took what was mine. They knew I was raising their children. They watched me coach their sons' baseball teams, host their birthday parties, pay their college tuition. They sat across from me at church picnics and neighborhood barbecues, knowing. Most disturbing was Luke's growing belief that his actions represented justice, not vengeance. His military career had been built on defending principles, honor, loyalty, truth. In his increasingly distorted thinking, these men had declared war on those very values. His response wasn't criminal, it was necessary restoration of moral order. The line between justice and revenge becomes dangerously thin for those experiencing compound trauma, Dr. Reed notes. When someone's identity is fundamentally threatened, primitive responses can override lifetime moral codes. By the 6th week after discovering the DNA results, Luke had completed his preparation phase. He purchased items that would later become evidence in a criminal investigation. His search history showed inquiries about alibi construction and forensic detection methods. The respected veteran who had spent a lifetime following rules now methodically planned to break the most fundamental one. What would you do if you were in Luke's position? Comment below while we explore how this respected veteran's mind turned toward the unthinkable. Thursday evening brought rain, steady, rhythmic drops that muffled sound and reduced visibility on the quiet streets. Luke chose this night deliberately. In his military days, whether had been a tactical consideration, tonight it served the same purpose. He parked 3 blocks from Pastor Davis's house, the man who had fathered Tiana during marriage counseling sessions. The ultimate betrayal, in Luke's mind, a spiritual leader who had violated both sacred trust and professional ethics while guiding a marriage he was actively undermining. Luke moved with the quiet efficiency that had once made him an effective soldier. His breathing remained measured, his hands steady. The rational part of his mind had receded, replaced by cold determination that narrowed his focus to a single point: confrontation. At 9:47 p.m., Luke rang the doorbell. Pastor Davis answered in casual clothes, recognition flooding his face. "Luke, what brings you here so late?" "We need to talk about Tiana." Confusion crossed Davis's face, then understanding, then fear. He stepped back, inviting Luke inside, a final pastoral instinct to contain what was coming. In the pastor's study, surrounded by theological books and family photos, Luke placed the DNA results on the desk. 40 years of lies. "You knew she was yours." "Look, please. It was a mistake, one time, decades ago. While counseling us on our marriage vows. I've asked God's forgiveness every day since. Did God grant it?" Luke's voice remained calm. "Because I won't." What happened next occurred in a blur of motion. The gun appeared in Luke's hand, his service weapon, maintained with the same care he'd always shown military equipment. The pastor raised his hands, backing toward the bookshelf. "Luke, think about Tiana." 3 shots broke the evening quiet. Precise. Center mass. Military training executing its final mission. Luke stood motionless as reality crashed back. The study smelled of gunpowder and copper. The weapon felt suddenly heavy in his hand. He had planned for this moment for weeks, yet nothing prepared him for the hollow emptiness that followed. He didn't run. He placed the weapon on the desk, walked to the leather chair across from the body, and sat down. When police lights flashed through the windows minutes later, Luke remained there, his mission complete, his honor avenged, his life effectively over. News of Pastor Davis's death split the community like lightning striking an old oak. Church members gathered in shocked prayer circles while veterans stood silent vigil outside the police station where Luke was held. "He shouldn't have done it, but I understand why he did," whispered Mrs. Johnson after Sunday service. Others nodded, though no one said it aloud. The neighborhood found itself caught between condemning violence and acknowledging a betrayal so profound it demanded some response. Odessa disappeared from public view, moving in with her sister 2 counties away. The 4 Garrison children, now adults with their own families, faced impossible questions about identity and loyalty. Should they stand by the man who raised them or condemn the killer of one of their biological fathers? The legal proceedings became a media sensation. Local outlets focused on the respected veteran-turned-killer angle. National programs debated the ethics of paternity deception. Talk shows invited experts to dissect the case from every angle. In the wood-paneled courtroom, Luke sat expressionless as attorneys built competing narratives. The prosecution painted him as a calculated killer who had planned meticulously. The defense constructed a more complex portrait. A decorated veteran with PTSD whose fundamental identity had been shattered by profound betrayal. Dr. Catherine Williams, testifying for the defense, explained, "What Mr. Garrison experienced goes beyond typical marital betrayal. Having his core identity as a father completely negated after 4 decades created a perfect storm when combined with his combat trauma. His military training provided both the means and mental framework for violence." The prosecution countered with its own experts. PTSD explains but doesn't excuse. Mr. Garrison understood his actions were wrong yet proceeded anyway. Outside the courthouse, opinion divided along predictable lines. Women's advocates highlighted the dangers of men viewing children as possessions. Veterans groups emphasized the mental health crisis among former service members. Religious leaders condemned the violence while acknowledging the betrayal's severity. What emerged was a case without heroes, only damaged people making devastating choices. The question facing the jury wasn't simply whether Luke had pulled the trigger, but whether decades of deception had left him capable of making a moral choice at all. Each of Luke's 4 children processed the dual trauma differently. Malik, the analytical firstborn, sought genetic counseling and met his biological father with clinical detachment. "I had 2 fathers," he told reporters. "One gave me DNA. One gave me values. I'm grieving both now." Deshaun refused all contact with his biological father, the music teacher. "Luke Garrison raised me. Period." His loyalty to the man who coached his baseball games and attended every concert remained unshaken, even as he visited Luke in prison. Patrice suffered the most visible breakdown, requiring hospitalization after attempting to confront her biological father. "My entire self-concept was fiction," she explained in therapy sessions. "Every family story I told about resembling my dad's side, meaningless." Tiana, whose biological father died by Luke's hand, carried the heaviest burden. She changed her name, moved across the country, and cut contact with both parents. Christmas cards returned unopened. Wedding invitations never sent. Beyond the Garrison family, concentric circles of damage spread outward. Pastor Davis's congregation collapsed under the weight of revealed secrets. The other biological fathers faced uncomfortable questions from their legitimate children. Neighbors who had admired the Garrison family questioned their own judgment. 5 years after the murder, psychologists published research on what became known as the Garrison effect, the catastrophic consequences when long-term deception meets volatile trauma. The case became required reading in ethics courses for marriage counselors, military psychologists, and medical professionals. The tragedy offers harsh but necessary lessons. First, deception compounds over time. What began as Odessa's desperate attempt to maintain stability grew into a lie too monstrous to contain. Truth delayed becomes truth destructive. Second, identity forms the core of psychological stability. When Luke's fundamental understanding of himself as a father collapsed, it triggered a crisis that overwhelmed decades of character development. Third, revenge never restores what was lost. Luke's violence created new victims without healing his wounds. His prison interviews reveal a man who gained nothing from his retribution. Finally, trauma untreated becomes trauma transmitted. Luke's PTSD, Odessa's secrets, and their children's shattered identities now extend into a 3rd generation of grandchildren grappling with a legacy they never chose. This tragedy holds powerful lessons for all of us. Share this video with someone who values honesty in relationships. The truth demands to be known. This axiom echoes through Luke Garrison's tragedy, a story with no heroes, only human beings trapped in consequences of their own making. In a quiet prison visiting room, Luke now sits across from grandchildren he'll never truly know. Odessa lives alone with memories of a family fractured beyond repair. For adult children struggle to rebuild identities on foundations of sand. One man lies in his grave. These are the real costs when deception becomes a way of life. What Luke's military career couldn't teach him, what no amount of combat could prepare him for, was that the most dangerous battlefield exists within our closest relationships. Trust, once broken, creates wounds deeper than any physical injury. We tell ourselves comforting lies, that some secrets protect rather than destroy, that revenge brings closure rather than new pain, that we can control the cascade of consequences once truth breaks free. Luke Garrison's story proves otherwise. What secrets would shatter your world if revealed today? What truths are you afraid to face? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe to Crime Insider for more stories that explore the darkest corners of human relationships and the price we pay for deception.